literally the time that you should think about getting out of the business is when you get into it. And if it's not then, today's a great day to start.
You can't expect to go into your first family meeting and resolve the transition plan. Please don't do that.
Hi, and welcome to the first episode of the Ag Podcast. I'm Crystal Mackay, and I am thrilled to be your host to guide us through some thought-provoking discussion with some really interesting guests who genuinely know and love agriculture and farming from the ground up. Yes, farm puns intended. While all of us depend on farmers for food, less than 2% of our population is actively farming today. And while the heart for feeding our country, caring for animals and the planet has stayed the same for generations, the size and shape of farms has changed dramatically in the last 100 years. And the big question is, what's it going to look like for our children and our grandchildren? A bit about me. I was actually born in Toronto and lived there till I was 7. And then my dream came true. My parents bought a farm in the Ottawa Valley, where my family still farms today. I still own some land there. I call it my happy place with no Wi-Fi. I've worked my entire career with and for all types of farmers and every aspect of the food system and in various roles, including Farm and Food Care and Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. In 2019, I co-founded a company we call Loft 32 to spend my time where I'm most passionate, which is to help other people elevate people and businesses and the conversations on food and farming. Exactly what we are doing here on this podcast. So before we get rolling today, I want to share a few quick facts about the state of farming in Canada. As I mentioned, less than 2% of our population farms today. 190,000 farms generate 62 billion in cash receipts each year. 97% of our farms are family owned and operated. And 60% of farmers are 55 and older, and their average farm size is now just over 800 acres. Over 40% of Canadian farms are going to change hands in the next 10 years. That's the big context, and that's what we're going to talk about, an issue that's top of mind for many farmers of all ages, but particularly those over 55, and that is succession planning. Joining us from Blackstock, Ontario is Maggie Van Camp, a farmer, former journalist, and National Director of Agriculture for BDO, an accounting firm, and now founder of Farmers Bridge, an area where she spends her efforts focused on farm succession. And from Humboldt, Saskatchewan, we welcome Patti Durand. She is a certified family enterprise advisor, and she's guided hundreds of farm families and their businesses and helped them navigate the paths of transition and succession to greener pastures, as we might say. So welcome to you both, and thank you for joining us. Maggie, you know farmers, you are one, you know them, you've had experience working with farmers from coast to coast and interviewing them in various varieties of ways. Is there such a thing as a typical Canadian farmer?
No.
Short answer.
Every farm is different. Every farm family is different. And that's one of the challenges. There's no cookie cutter solutions. So you actually have to work with farm families to get a solution together. Like you can't just say, stamp, here you go.
Right. So some examples of what do farmers look like and what do farm families look like in Canada today?
Well, I think I'm going to question your statistics a little bit because they're from 2021 and things have changed a great deal in the years. As you said, 40% of farmers are going to retire here in the next decade. The average age of farmers is 56 today, accordingly. What we're seeing is a gap. There's an 80-20 rule where 20% of the farmers are actually producing 80% of the food. And that's probably bigger than 80-20. And so we're seeing this sort of gap in size. The trend toward consolidation and scale is happening. And there's been a decrease sort of in middle-sized farmers, particularly and sort of a donut shaped, I guess, is what we're looking at today. And that's been predicted to go on to the future. So really interesting times demographically for Canadian agriculture.
Absolutely. Patti, does this ring true for you? Do you see anything different east to west?
Very much so, I would say, and that's probably where I think people tend to think about the differences. They tend to like, oh man, like we're talking about soup to nuts, we're talking about such changes, and so when, like, for example, the average Canadian farm being 800 acres, like I don't know an 800-acre farmer in this area, right? Like it would be unusual to be under 1,000 acres. It would be unusual to be under 2,000 acres. It's neither here nor there. What I think is interesting to me is that as much as every single farm is unique, their plan and their family is one of a kind. They're constantly looking for the way. And so it's a really interesting aspect of somehow they claim independence and yet simultaneously struggle with wanting to copy what works. So yeah, that thread really resonates with me for sure.
It's really interesting. Like as parents, we want to give our children the solution. And I've even struggled this with my own family. We're going through transition planning and I know better. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, here's the solution. Here's the structure we need to do. And there's so much power in the process of figuring that out together that if you skip that part, you miss out on a huge opportunity.
That's really sage words as usual, Maggie. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing our farmers and farm families in the near future?
So personally, I feel like things that have been done historically, the way that farms came into the current leaders' hands, are not working for several reasons. So effectively, you get this when I die was kind of the mechanism. And now people are living longer. The asset values have cranked. They're so much more expensive. They've multiplied several times. But I would say that the functioning and the organization and the communication around it of that family farm hasn't changed to match it. And so I believe that's the biggest challenge. And yet it's really equally challenging to say, do better, right? It's a big ask. And that's what I really perceive as the kind of the, multi-million-dollar question right now.
Yeah, I'm a victim of poor succession planning. So I mentioned I was born in Toronto. My mom's family farm, the farmhouse is still there, is Dixon Road, where the Toronto airport is. So technically, we should be mega millionaires, and sadly to say, we are not. So yeah, I don't know what went wrong there, but yeah, definitely, yeah, you die and you get it, and yeah, all of the things, absolutely. Maggie, chime in on what you see the big challenges are in the near future.
There's some megatrends, right? We all know the megatrends in Canadian agriculture of scale, consolidation, specialization, all the Asians, technology increase. The labor needs are huge and getting worse. And of course, the random inputs and resources that we're using, of course, those are the overall. Add in a layer of politics and what is going on in the world globally. So those kind of things are happening, and some things are happening all the time, right? The overarching one is, I believe, demographics. I see this very clearly. When you said 40% of farmers are going to retire, if we don't look at that, as an industry and go, how is that going to impact things in 10 years? Then we will not be prepared. That is a huge change that's happening, and it's an opportunity. I look at it as an opportunity for existing farmers. I look at it as an opportunity for our industry as we're going forward, because if we succeed to the next generation, we automatically get better at what we do. It's such a great part of this that nobody talks about. The succession effect happens, and we learn how to make strategic decisions together. And there's a really good opportunity here if we do it well. And we don't let us fall to, what'd you say, a succession victim?
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of that is just worrying. People don't act because they're worried about doing it. This is uncomfortable. This is new.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into this succession planning. I mean, it's huge. Obviously, you think about almost half of our farms need to change hands, and we're not going to do the just die and it's yours. So, Patti, you're an action verb person. What should farmers be thinking about in terms of their succession plan? Say they're 40, say they're 60, say they're 80. What are some key principles they should be thinking about?
I think a foundational thing, as I sat with farm families and working with them, and there was an awareness that I would love people to start with. So succession and transition, I will say, I kind of use those words interchangeably, but transition, people ask, is your farm in transition? Light bulb. Every farm is in transition. It's just whether or not they're actively thinking about and planning and preparing for the future they desire. So if you think, oh, we're not there yet, or it's not time, literally the time that you should think about getting out of the business is when you get into it. And if it's not then, today's a great day to start. And so shifting that mindset, because people will say, well, how long does it take to transition? And I'll say 15 years is nice. 20 years is great. People are shoving it into a 2 to 5 year period. And the dynamics of, especially considering the dollars, as well as the communication and understanding, it creates a bottleneck and a stress that is beyond challenging. It's very complex. And so think about the opportunity of starting today.
I love that. Maggie, with that in mind, just thinking a little bit about what can people do in the short term and then with the longer term in mind.
Get their crap in order.
Yeah. I can all do a little better in that.
Let's start with that. Is that okay to say on a podcast?
Yeah, I think so.
You can't expect to go into your first family meeting and resolve the transition plan. Please don't do that. Learn how to communicate first. Start gathering information. So when I say communicate, have a family meeting once a year. Set up code of conduct for your family and how you're going to do this. And don't talk about transition. That's too big of an issue. That's a huge issue. It's the biggest issue people are going to face in their whole career. So learn how to do it first by setting up a code of conduct, maybe bring in some help. Start talking about other things in the family and how to organize them. Learn how to communicate first. I sat down with my children, and the youngest was 14 at the time. And we sat down in the library, actually, and we said, okay, how are we going to do this? And we wrote down rules. My son said we arrive on time. That was one of his. It does not have to be complicated. Turn off your cell phone. Don't swear. I didn't swear on the podcast, by the way.
Yeah. I think crap is not a swear word. I'm just saying.
It's not official. These kind of things really, really matter because you can touchstone them later and say, okay, everybody gets a voice. Who has a vote on what issues? Those kind of things can be really set up right up front, and then there's no question. Patti, you want to add to that?
I think I would just say make it your own. Your family. Make it make sense. If it makes sense to have a meeting on a tailgate, that counts. It doesn't have to be around a board table. But if it is around a board table and that's what suits you, so it's about commitment to each other and respect.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be all serious either. Yeah. It can be lots of fun. I've seen some families, we have a great time. We go out for lunch after. Our family has, I've seen families do some wonderful things together and create sort of an environment of togetherness, familyness, I guess would be what it's called, before they dive into the big issue of transition planning / past potatoes. Yeah.
It's about having a dedicated time when your family's going to choose to talk about this away from your kind of family relationships and celebrations. And so if you don't set up that platform, they will shove it in wherever they can because they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Consistency,
absolutely.
Right? Too, in that, so that builds trust in a way that nothing else can. If there's going to be another meeting in 6 months, then, that builds trust in the process and each other. Yeah. And understand that this is a business. This is not, the topic is very serious and it's generational businesses mostly. So I do believe that transparent communication is important, but understanding who has a voice there and who has ears there and who has a vote on what happens, I think that's a really clear designation that needs to be set up front.
Think about who needs to be at this table. Who will these decisions impact? Like your daughter or son-in-law, they're not just watching this vehicle go by, they're in the car. So like think about how it impacts them, and different discussions should have different people there. So perhaps there is a general family discussion about what are your worries? What are your hopes? What are you thinking about? Again, not necessarily a vote for decision, but getting a place to say it and getting a place to evaluate and unpack that with people. But then also operational day-to-day decisions and discussions. That's not really a great place for non-involved people, because they can sure speak up and have an opinion, but it isn't really, they're not qualified per se. So it's what it lends itself to is there probably are a few different kinds of meetings. There's some operational, there's some project and budget decisions, there's long-term planning. I think at the end of the day, I just want people to think, am I making a plan determining someone else's future without giving them a voice? Because I think that is rampant and it concerns me greatly.
I actually met a family, the McGregors from Eastern Ontario. Crystal, you probably bought sweet corn from them. Lovely family. I interviewed them a while ago. And they had 3 meetings, and their family meeting, they met once a year, and they talked how the farm was serving the family, and they invited everyone except the children. They got a babysitter for the children. And I'm like, smart, because how many times have you been discluded because you're chasing after a kid in the next room? That's not appropriate either. So I thought that was a really smart annual family meeting. How is the farm serving the family? Important.
Now, we're talking about business, but there's a lot of emotion and feelings. So, we get into some contentious issues, some people who has a voice, who has a vote, etc. Any advice on how to deal with those contentious issues?
I feel that that's part of what I was describing earlier, where our habits haven't evolved to match the dollars and the other things that have changed. So some of the things that we get hooked on are some of our old family habits, right? Stonewalling because I said so, or just not talking at all, or having a temper tantrum, and that's totally normal. And then we never talk about it again.
Yeah.
So I think that those are considerations in terms of evolving to like, okay, what is actually functional? What's actually going to work?
Patti and I came up with an interesting term called thin ice response. And it's based on understanding how you manage conflict. And there's whole theories around it. But basically, there's 4 types of how people interact with conflict. And understanding that if you start acting in a certain way, that you're like, we're on thin ice. Can we just back out of here and do this instead and then come back to this topic later? Is absolutely fine. So I guess it's self-awareness that you got to get to around how you handle conflict and how others that you're making decisions now together, how they handle conflict. Sounds way easier than it is. But that's like
it's a habit.
Yeah.
It's like we are going to commit as a family that we know that we have never solved anything with a blow up. We have never solved anything with a yelling match. Yeah. And so we are gonna give each other permission and a safe way to say time out. We're going to go and take a breather. This is super important. We're coming back, but we know that we are not in any kind of shape to do this well. The other emotional thing I would say that I encounter frequently is like, we try to talk about this stuff, but then they start crying. there's generally a crier in the room.
Always a crier.
And
yeah.
So in either one of these examples or whatever heightened emotion you're encountering, it's very reasonable to say, maybe we need to have a third party. Maybe we need to have someone come in who can provide a neutral way of asking questions, of calming, and just taking away some of the strings and some of the baggage that families can trip on.
Yeah, great advice. And just to carry on with that, what resources are available, to people listening and thinking about this topic, young or old, to say, okay, I want to get started. I want to have a meeting. I want to think about a plan, long-term, short-term. What is available to help? Maggie, can you kick us off with some examples?
There is a bucket load of resources out there. Like almost too much to sort through. I knew a family that had resource-itis. She had a box full and couldn't get her way through. But I also believe that you need some help. You need professionals, and beyond reading every article ever written about succession planning, there is help out there. So just understand that clearly, that you're not alone. For example, Farmers Bridge, we have on our website, which is going to be, I think, shared. There's Patti and I talking about conflict and how to move from family communications to business communications. So 20 minutes, watch it, great. You might cue into a couple of things. Does that make you have a succession plan? No. What you need is to find people that are going to help you get organized, fill the step-by-step position, how to get started. There's lots of great people out there who can help you. It is going to get very busy. So, Crystal, I'm just going to say this right now. There is no way it's not. So if you are hesitating, if you're waiting, don't get at it. Get at it now, because it's not going to get any easier if you sit on it for longer.
Yeah, great advice. Patti, some examples of resources people should be aware of.
There's quite a lot, I would say, from coast to coast. And something that comes to mind and a program that I was involved with was Farm Credit Canada has a free advisory services program. It is available if you go to your local Farm Credit Canada office. And I like that in some of the provinces, there's the ministries of agriculture have various resources along those lines as well. Something that I really like to recommend is talk to your existing advisors. So who is your accountant? Who is your lawyer? And say, hey guys, we're struggling with this. We don't really know where to start. What would you recommend? Can you help us? And then talk to peers. Say, hey, you've been navigating this. I know we're not alone in this experience. What have you done? Because I think it's easy to say, use these two things, but truly, you kind of need to think about what's going to serve you best. So that actually comes back to the family conversation. I think the way that I've coached families and what I will continue to do is, what are we trying to achieve? You are not the expert on the how to get there, but you should be the expert on the destination. What exactly would a perfect outcome look like? And then who might help us get there? So having some of those conversations around, this is what we're trying to achieve, being able to clearly say that, and getting some help in putting those words together, I would say is a fair bit of the work that I tend to do. And I know Maggie has other examples, but people are just looking for the way, and we can get through there.
We can get through this for sure. I think, a multidisciplinary approach makes some sense. But if you don't have a goal figured out before you get there, if you don't have a goal that everyone agrees, not just in your head, then it's going to be really difficult, and you're probably going to get to the wrong solution. So for example, this wonderful family in Atlantic, Canada, they went through this big succession tax plan. They went they had hired people. They spent a ton of money. They got to the end. They were reviewing what this amazing, complicated tax plan was, because tax accountants are absolute geniuses, and the rules around it, I'm never going to get to. So you have to understand, you need to bring somebody in, but they still hadn't decided together. And the one brother said, no, I want to retire next year. Boom. The bomb was laid. They wasted, I can say, 6 figures of money doing a really great tax plan. Problem. You don't want to do that.
So the analogy I give farm families often on that realm is, in order to avoid thinking about spending dollars, because it is an investment and a worthwhile one, but it's the equivalent. If you say, go to your accountant, go to your lawyer, say, make me a transition plan. It's the equivalent of picking up your cell phone and saying, Siri, tell me where to go.
Yeah.
If you are not clear on your destination, the way you get there kind of doesn't matter. And accountants and lawyers are particularly good at implementing your instructions.
Yes.
So you have to provide that. Right. That's on you.
That's wise.
Figure out how to get there.
Yeah. I feel a lot of people have a piecemeal approach, like I need a lawyer, I need an accountant, I need a banker, and each of them have their own expertise. But to your point, you need to create your own map and how to get there. So I hate to do this, but we need to move to our final question. If you've liked what you've heard so far, our listeners, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you and what you're thinking about these topics that we've covered. Now, to each of us, we're going to say this is a magic podcast, and you have the opportunity to share one piece of free advice to every single farmer in Canada, either current or future. One piece of free advice. What would it be on this topic? Maggie?
Communicate. Communicate. Can I say that? What does that mean exactly? Learn how to make decisions together and engage and inspire. Let the next generation try stuff and fail. But always communicate your way through that. You're developing not only a succession plan, but married with a retirement plan. And so that really needs to be talked about as a family. So if you can learn how to do that, it'll make the process way better and actually create a success not only for your family, but for your business.
Amazing. Thanks, Maggie. Patti, magic. One piece of free advice to every Canadian farmer. Go.
I feel really strongly, and I will say this directly, if you are farming, nobody cares about this like you do. This is your farm. Therefore, you must lead this. But you can seek help to do that. Only you can seek help to do that. And I can't wait to witness you do it because it's going to be beautiful.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you both for sharing your insights and your ideas on this topic. I know we all share Heart for Farmers, and I just really appreciate how committed you both are to really advancing this topic and the farm families that we know and love, and those we haven't got to meet yet, but are absolutely there to help them too. So thank you. And thanks to everyone for watching and listening. We're going to be adding some resources, including some that Maggie and Patti mentioned on the show notes on YouTube. So check it out. And thanks for joining us.